Welcome back to another Beyond the Boundary Westmarches Revival Guide. Uh, we're here today to look into our newly created homebrew primer. So that's our uh, just a compendium of all the changes that we've made in the game that we play for 5th edition D&D. The homebrew rules that we have set aside for player options and gameplay changes. So if you're pretty new to the server, welcome. And what you'll be suggested straight away a lot of the times is this guidelines section. So hopefully this is what you'll see when you come in. The guideline section here will have a link to our Beyond the Boundary homebrew primer as a PDF. You can download that, or otherwise on the general, if you go to the pin section, we have the homebrew primer there as a Google Doc if you don't want to download it. I'll be looking at the Google Doc today, just because my viewer has a bit of problems clicking links and stuff like that. So here's the link to that Google Doc, and this is what you'll see straight away. So the compendium here mentions that it's the changes that we've made. Anything that is in here should be backed up by the World Anvil or the Roll20 handouts. If not, let us know. We'd like to keep this up to date as the source of information and make sure that World Anvil backs that up. The character options that we allow in this game are listed. So we'll start by going down the list. In the official classes, we've banned a lot of the source books that have recently come out and added the options for a lot of subclasses and spells, as well as like warlock invocations if you're a warlock. So these are just the lists of the official stuff that we have banned. If you have a look, some of these have their star, like a bard or a ranger, and that's because they're in this second part here, the official revisions. These are the reworks, or just like, we've added something to a class. In this case as well. For example, if you want to be a monk, you can use the new short rest, recover some of your key points feature that we'll be granting. And it should bring monks in line with some of the power spikes that we added for other classes, and make you feel like it's worth playing this unarmored class after everything's changed with our new system. On top of that, there is clickable links, so you should be able to go into the class restriction table. If you click that, you get brought to the World Anvil, and it lists all the classes we have, but what we'll do is we'll come back to that in a bit. On top of the revision classes and official allowed classes, the homebrew classes that we have listed here are the Alchemist. We have a special type of Blood Hunter that's available on a GM binder. There's a Dancer, a Pugilist, the Warden, and a Warlord class. So the Alchemist is a bomb-throwing potion creation class. And part of the reason why we banned some of the subclasses for an Artificer that uses Alchemist as their subclass, we've made it into this whole class with level 1 to 20. Same thing goes for some of the other classes, but here, the Blood Hunter, we don't use the normal one that you would find on D&D Beyond. This one here just has a lot more oomph behind it, and it's a bit more well thought out. Although D&D Beyond last year, around September I think it was, has updated a lot of their features to be very close to this Blood Hunter. But this Blood Hunter's been out for about 1.5 years now, so I mean, yeah, get it, I guess. The Dancer class is a bard style character, but they, instead of using performances to kind of like buff allies, they have a lot of like performances to control the field or give allies a whole action in place of what the dancer would usually do. We have this bare knuckle fighter called the Pugilist. I don't know if you've played any of the Final Fantasy games, but it's essentially from that, and it's a fisticuffs brawler style character, and it uses similar features like the monk. On top of that, we have the Warden, which is one of the interesting tank classes. And finally, we have Kibbles Tasty's Warlord, which is the one that I've seen used the most out of these homebrews. And yeah, the Warlord's very interesting. It's like in the 4th edition, there was this class that would give people commands and kind of give actions to others and stuff that way. We have 2 allowed, but they will change if things get out of hand. So allowed for playtest. These classes here are not fully released, or I don't think they're fully ready. I think The Witch has since probably been fully released, but the talent from MCDM, Matt Coville's creation on N-World, the Vanguard, which at the time of recording I think was very close to being finished too, and the Gunslinger from Heavy Arms, and that one there's the ones that I would probably consider one of the best gunslingers in the game. So these ones here are allowed to be played, but they're just right now playtest material. So once they get published, things might change about them. Allowed again under probation. This is the second allowed classes that aren't in my approved straight away homebrew classes, but you can give them a shot if you're willing to speak to the GM. You need to actually be aware. If we look into it and say something is really powerful on it and we can't just adjust for it normally, we would have to maybe change the class, how it functions stuff a bit. A lot of the times that I wrote here, I trust the creator, and their designs usually will not go overboard. They're not going to be overpowered too much, so it should be good. And so these are a few of the other classes that I don't have in this game. Maybe the Blood Hunter is already a Blood Hunter in this game. We already have a Witch. Stuff like the Scion and stuff like that. All these are really interesting classes. I just don't have them in this game for one reason or another. Moving on, so this is another part of the character creation options. We have a new spell list. So, as I mentioned, Tasha's Cauldron and Xanathar's Guide as source books have been removed. So that would remove a lot of their awesome spells, like for example, an easy one that I always think of is Zephyr Strike. A lot of people use Zephyr Strike and it's really strong. Instead, we have this article where you can click and it's got subclass and spells. If you go down to the spells section, these are the replacement for Tasha's and Xanathar Guide spells. So you're allowed to use Kibbles Tasties, Cold Press Deep Magic, Tome of Heroes, which is the same as Deep Magic, Volder's Spire of Secret Spells, Dark Arts Player Companions, and the Sprouting Chaos Player Companion spells. Across these, there should be about 900 new spells, approximately, maybe just under, but it is, you're going to be able to find spells that replicate a lot of what the very interesting spells did in the Kibbles Tasty section, or new spells altogether with Deep Magic, Volder's Spire kind of like taking on all the new kind of improvements that we've learned over the 5 years or 6 years that D&D 5th edition's been out. And on top of that, we revised a few of the spells. So spells like Armor of Agathist and Goodberry have been changed. Not to make them unusable, but at the same time, there's a bit of balancing and a bit of reasoning behind it. So you should see that there's a reason for some of these revised balancing. I'm Vegas. There's, I think another person in different videos talked about this a bunch, but um, it's a warlock spell. But if you get it through our features that we have in this game, like say for example, you can learn warlock spells, um, and then you cast it at 6th level or whatever it is with a 6th level slot. It starts to get insane with our damage reduction that we have as a feature. So if you're only taking like hits that deal like 6 damage, that should be maybe like 10 or something like that. Your temporary hit points can like kind of stretch out way longer. And it seems like it's a bit overpowered to just do like 30 damage each time someone tries to multi-attack you. With that, Good Berry has been changed so that the Life Berry combo doesn't work. If you cast Good Berry as a Life Cleric through the gaining that feature, what would do is that you can grant an extra, let's say you have, let's say your Life Berry is healed for 6 or 7 or something, you would only be able to use the action to give that to one person. After that, it heals 1 hit point. We've also changed it so that there is the mistletoes required, and that will be used up. So you have to buy another mistletoe as a material component. We'll go into why that matters in a bit. Some of the stuff that we've banned is some spells, 1st level, and some cantrips. These banned spells is Eldritch Blast and True Strike as cantrips. Eldritch Blast has a reason because it's now going to be a feature of the Warlock. When you take Warlock, you'll be able to have Eldritch Blast as an attack action feature, which means that it's no longer a spell, so it can't be blocked by spell effects and stuff like that. Shield and Silvery Barbs, they always fit into any kind of spell book. So if anyone has these, they're going to be cheering a lot of the times, and it's a bit of a crutch for some people. So I've taken it away. They're both really strong. Silvery Barbs was banned in my other game, but Shield wasn't. I've just seen that Shield's too overused now, and Shields is now banned as well. Onto races, so now we're past spells. The races that gain magic resistance, so that's, I believe, one of the Fae, the Yanti, and other kind of like races like that. They will no longer get their magic resistance trait, and if you want to play something like a Yanti, and that was like the whole idea of it, we can work together to change that magic resistance that you lost into something else. I just think maybe like a Yanti bite or something might be cooler than the fact that you just scales magic resist. Powerful build feature, so a lot of these classes in the monster manual, Modern Cadence monster manual, got this given to them. But powerful build makes it so that you can lift and carry things at double your strength modifier. Now with powerful build, this applies to shovels, grapples and shove. The banned races, so there's only 5 specific options that aren't really allowed. So with that, changelings, we don't want characters to have that, like, essentially a full spell of changing your looks just for free all the time. Even if the changeling kind of has to get nerfed or whatever it is, it's either a roleplay thing that's not really used under a utilized, or it's used for like weird reasons. So we're just gonna take it away. Dampiers are removed. It is a pretty strong race, but we've got a few of those. The reason why is because there is already a vampire. There is already vampires in this game that have changed to be more like another Magic the Gathering setting. I believe it's Ixalan, and it's the one where they can walk in the light, and they can change into inky blots and fly with their legs becoming ink. So that vampire has taken over the canonical vampire, and that means there's I don't agree with the fact that there's going to be Dampiers of that version. On top of that, anything from the Eberron setting that's a mark, a dragon mark, or these other kind of like classes, these races that start with, a full feat almost, spells and extra features. These ones here are not in the game. Simic Hybrid and Tortle are the ones that we could think of straight away that change your AC by getting bonuses and fitting on, kind of like a natural defense. And we took those away. If you want to make a Turtle class, let us know. We can look into a homebrew Turtle that doesn't gain the armor class like a Turtle does. And locking you out of the whole like armor system, because I would prefer not to have a not to have it with the armor changes that we're implementing. Additional features, so you can on the background in the next part you can get any standard or exotic language, so thieves' cant, druidics, like abyssals and stuff like that. They're all allowed to be taken as an option for your language. And in Tashes, you can change which proficiency you would choose in your background. So say, for example, Acolyte is religion and something else. And say you wanted to be an Acolyte of a monastery that focuses on like this inner perfection, and their athletics and perception. They would allow that as a monasteric kind of like culture, and that would be where your background comes from. So you just change the feature and make sure that your backstory aligns. So on to the next one. This is character creation proper. So in the character creation, we have a rule where we use the point buy system, and point buy, you can use a bunch of calculators. There's a few listed on the Discord, but it's a lot better when everyone has the same amount of resources for their ability scores as everyone else. But that being said, we do have an option for the legacy characters, and they get less resources, but they gain features of their armor can reduce damage. They're able to use this defensive layer feature, which is called the guard point, as well as upgrading their armors and using active abilities. So all the legacy characters can get that, whereas just a standard character plays the 27 point buy. As well as that, we have the feats alternative rule in the in this game. We use a talent tree as a replacement for feats. The article here shows a bit more about it, but essentially what you would see is that there's an example tree here. What you would take is acrobatics as base ability, and if you're proficient in acrobatics, you can take path C step 1, path B step 1, or path A step 1, just as a freebie. So 1 point spent gets you 2 abilities, the base ability, as well as path A, B, or C step 1. And then let's say you have another point available, you can then jump straight to step 2. To get to the capstone, you need to go from 1 to 2. You can't go 1 and then change path. But you can pick up other paths if you like. Say you want 1 and 2, but you don't want the capstone just yet, and you do want path A step 1, you can grab that. But just so you know, there's a bit of freebies with this progression on a tree section. On top of that, the next one is the alignment. So there is an alignment chart that kind of aligns a bit with how D&D does it. And it's these colors in this chart, so your characters can kind of take from all these different sections, and we don't like the just lawful good and stuff like that, where a lawful good character might take order, but also be very, like, you know, action and freedom orientated. They want to make sure that everyone should be allowed to do what they want. They shouldn't be chained. They should be kind of free to govern their own existence. That would still be considered a lawful good character, but it takes parts from the white and the red, if that makes sense. That same lawful good character could be using white and blue, for example, and stuff like you would be a peaceful person who is all about not fighting and learning the logic of how to solve problems. There's a bunch of videos on how to do that, but again, not required. I've even put that here. Your outlook on the world should be based off that color chart, not just the 9 alignment options in D&D. The next part is the proficiencies you get from your intelligence modifier. So if I have a look at a character over here, my character here has a low intelligence. What I'll do is just bump it up. I'm going to make it 14. So what would happen is that this character has a +2 to intelligence. You can see that because this field is a 2, and if you look at stuff like insight, you'll get a +2. Sorry, if you look at history, you get a +2. That modifier is not because of the proficiency here. The history modifier is +2 because of intelligence. So that plus that you would get can be an additional language, an additional skill or tool proficiency. So say for example I've got simple and martial weapons, I would want to add something like the flute as a proficiency. And I get another one, I get 2, so the other one is going to be the skill proficiency for survival. So now I've got 2 extra proficiencies, just off the fact that my character's taking points into intelligence. Some people have argued that this might make like some wizards and the blood hunters, and artifice is a bit too strong, but I don't think it's going to affect it too much. They don't get anything like expertise off this or anything. It's just an extra proficiency. Conditions. In this game, dark vision is not a like full not a full night vision goggle where you can see completely in the darkness. It is more like you're upping the brightness in a video game kind of thing. You can see, but it's really dark still. And that is the rules as written. So we are going with the option that it says in the rules as written. And that means you have disadvantage on sight checks. Even if you have dark vision, your perception will be at disadvantage in those areas because it'll be as if you're in dim light, is what it says. On top of that, invisibility has this weird known issue. We are playing as the rules intended for invisibility to work, so the invisibility will actually make your character invisible, as you would expect it. In the next part, your character going prone now provokes an attack of opportunity. So say, for example, if you're a really strong character and you like shoving, and then at the end of your turn you shove them to the ground, you should be able to then, when they try to stand up on their turn, attack them. Just makes the prone feature just so much better. Yeah, definitely strong. Next one is falling unconscious. So we've changed unconscious status. When you're unconscious, you're incapacitated. You cannot move or speak. You're unaware of your surroundings. You drop whatever you're holding and fall prone. So say, for example, if you have a sword and shield, you would lose the 2 AC from the shield. You automatically fail strength and dexterity saving throws. I think previously it was only a dexterity saving throw that you would fail. But now you will automatically fail any of those saves. Attack rolls against creatures. Against that creature will have advantage, so ranged attacks in this change as well will have advantage on unconscious prone creatures. But when they're prone, they also have disadvantage, so just be a normal. Any attack roll that hits the creature is a critical hit, and if the attack is within 5 feet. If you fall unconscious as a result of dropping to 0 hit points, as if someone has kind of knocked you down, you would usually be going to death saves. You also gain a level of exhaustion. So on your first death saves, you'll be -1ing for that level of exhaustion. And we'll go into that in a second. We have a lingering injuries table that's kind of based on that last line of critting a character that's unconscious on the ground. If you are paralyzed or unconscious, you will be able to effectively apply a lingering injury to an enemy, or if an enemy does it to you, you will have a lingering injury. Usually, lingering injury only really happens if you're taking half your hit points in a single turn of your current remaining. So say you have 30 hit points and you take 15 in a hit, you roll for the lingering injury. Same as if you're surprise rounded in a melee attack, they may be able to make you roll for a lingering injury. As well as that, there's a new condition called the dazed, and when you are dazed, you make a you must make a DC 10 dexterity saving throw after using dash action, or you may fall prone. And as well as that, you can't use reactions when you're dazed. Some of the other changes that we've gone into in this game is that we've flipped criticals, and now that in the D&D 1 D&D system, they want to make it so that crit skill checks exist, and this one here, there's no guaranteed success on a skill check. If a skill is, requires a 35 and you get a nat 20, you won't just automatically succeed. Encumbrance, we don't track it, but we would always say you shouldn't be able to have 7 greatswords on your character. Not without some sort of additional kind of item, like a bag of holding of sort. So what we've said is a good suggestion is you're able to carry your strength score worth of items. So if you have 16 strength, you should be able to carry 16 items, including the armors and weapons worn. Powerful build will double this carrying capacity, and so it's a good buff to both of those, both sides of the powerful build. With resource tracking, we don't track ranged ammunition like arrows, bullets, stuff like that, but within reason. So make sure that you're stocked up, and you won't really have to worry about if you spent all your 20 arrows, and we'll just automatically let you kind of collect them without your character kind of saying, yes, I'm going to go out and collect them. With critical fumbles, we don't actually allow that either. If you roll a nat 1, we won't make you roll on some sort of like your weapon explodes table or anything like that. Moving on, so one of the big changes that we've had 4 rest types, which are the quick rest, which is once a day. You can only quick rest for 10 minutes once a day, but you get the same effects of a short rest in that. The short rest is 1 hour, the long rest is 8 hours, as it normally is, and there's a full rest system, which takes 7 days, and you recover all health, and there's a bunch of other stuff you get. You can get more information in a article under the leveling up full rest required. In game, when you're not in combat, you'll be spending 1 hour in character, which will represent 2 hours passing in the world. It's just because we want to make sure that speed kind of is in pairs of hours. So if something would take 2 hours, that's essentially 4 hours worth. Just to kind of not too much of a stress on it and stuff like that. And then we can do like, every 2 hours you do a check. And that would be how that works. We are using a system around the combat role playing and exploration rewards EXP. So say for example, if you go into a dungeon and you figure out a puzzle, you may get EXP for that. If you find a missing temple entrance, you may get EXP for that, as well as like a combat situation. If there's 10 gnolls near you, you would get EXP for defeating the gnolls, but you would also get EXP for sneaking away around them or diplomatically dealing with them. And then once you reach the EXP threshold, each time now is 100 EXP. You will require that to get a level up, and you can get a level up once you've completed a full rest, so you need 7 days. You can't do that in an unsafe area if the 7 days are interrupted by combat or anything like that, then you are starting again. In the section for leveling up, every time you would level up and get hit points, you would start with rolling a dice, and if you get lower than the average, say for example you're sorcerer and you would get d8s. Sorry, not sorcerer. Say you're a bard and you get d8s. Anything lower than a 5, you would re-roll. So you can get 5, 6, 7, and 8. Any of the like really high numbers, you're just rolling to see when you would get like which one of those would you get in that way. So as well as that, a skill check is made to summarize roughly 1 minute of performing a check. Say for example, if you want to use a lockpick challenge and you're being asked to use the skill for that, then that would take about a minute once you've done that skill check. It could be a bit more. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 minutes, depending on some of the tasks, but yeah. Moving on, we have under skill checks, we have the cooperative checks and the gauntlet skill checks, a lot of these are covered in the handout in Roll20. As well as that, we have the initiative system that normally uses during combat, but during a role play or problem solving initiative, there's the Moxie, and that uses intelligence. If you have advantage or pluses to your initiative based on a feature, you don't get those in your Moxie initiative. Lastly, if you want to use different abilities scores for different abilities, as long as you can explain it happening, then we allow it. So, say for example, religion's usually a wisdom, but if you want to use intelligence because of your scripture knowledge, then you can use intelligence instead. And finally, the changes that we've made for crits. If you roll a critical attack instead of just rolling an additional dice, you now use the vulnerabilities feature of doubling it. The handout in Roll20 kind of explains this. And if you're vulnerable to damage, instead of taking double damage, you now only take one additional dice per kind of damage source. And yeah, the articles in World End will actually explain that pretty well. Coming up to the next part, exhaustion. So the exhaustion mechanic has been changed, and I did enjoy the other one, but it wasn't going to fit with the knockdown, get unconscious exhaustion that we're going to be using, because I felt it was a bit too punishing. So now you have a minus to your skill checks up to 5, and as well, if you're on the second level exhaustion, you're making and you're making a dash action, you would have to do a DC dexterity saving throw, or your action is wasted. Additional stuff like you're dazed, which means that you are having to make that DC 10 dexterity saving throw, but as well, you now have a -3 to that saving throw, and if you fail, you fall over instead at the 3rd level of exhaustion. At 4th level, you can't use the disengage action as well, and at 5th level, your movement speed is reduced to 5. You're at a crawl's pace, essentially, and you're now vulnerable to all damage. Usually that would be double damage, but we've just explained that vulnerability is now. An enemy would have an extra dice. So one dagger from a goblin, when you're 5th level exhaustion, will be a D4 and another D4, just because you're vulnerable to that piercing damage it does. And yeah, I explained before, as part of this exhaustion, if you fall unconscious, you gain a level of exhaustion. If you drop down to 0 hit points, and that causes you to fall unconscious. But straight away, that just means that if you're on the level 1, you'll go straight to level 2 during your death saves, if you need to make any. Next up, we have the initiative section. When you roll your initiative, you can choose to kind of lower it and make yourself maybe last in the list if you're a healer and you want to make sure that if someone goes down that you'll heal them, or if you want to go lower in the turn order, say a paladin is second and you're first and you want to go after them, because the paladin will do a combo that you can work off of, you can do that. You can't go above, and once you've changed it once, you can't do that again using this like lowering initiative feature. You can only do that when you roll for the first time. As well as that, there is tandem, so let's say you and an ally both get 16, you both have the same 12 dexterity modifiers, so that would show on Roll20 16, 12. Both of you have 16, 12, you can then choose at the beginning of either your turns who wants to go first. And so say the paladin and the cleric are both on that turn, maybe the paladin wants to go first, but then the next time the paladin is really low, or the cleric is going to bless, the cleric can then use its turn. It's very tactical from tactical games. On top of that, we ever use the object interaction. Usually it's a free feature, but we've changed it a little bit. So in some of the homebrews that we have, you can use an improvised attack with an item. When you actually throw an item like a alchemist fire or like a bomb in one of the class features, you're not going to hit a creature and deal 1d4 damage as you usually would. If you do hit a creature, it's only going to use the item's effect. Like say for example, the bomb will explode or the alchemist fire will shatter and burn them. On top of that, if you need to use a potion, either on yourself or an ally, it requires a whole action. Some people use the bonus action table rule, and we have enough like potions to go around, so I think everyone should be able to continue using this potion as an action as intended in 5e, I guess. The exploration inspiration rework. So what we've done is that inspiration now stacks to 3. I'll show you what that looks like on the Roll20. So my character here is a level 2 ranger, and I'll start with 1 inspiration. If I gain another inspiration by, let's say, like I try to do a check and fail, I would get a second inspiration. And then an ally is about to be hit with a damaging blow that I don't want them to be hit by, so I'll ask for the DM to reroll with an inspiration. I take that inspiration away. And that's all just here in this field on your character sheet. In here it mentions about that rule where if you fail a check outside of combat, you get an inspiration as you're learning through adversity. Additionally, if you complete a long rest, that first inspiration and all the other ones taken away, you start again at 0. But there's roleplay ways of getting an inspiration back. Just speak to the DM about how you would kind of like want to get inspiration in their game, and they might be able to help you out with advice. The fate point section is another part of the inspiration rework. These are 3 fate points, and they are now granted by the DMs. At the end of the game, you'll be granted a fate point, or if your roleplay is good enough during the game, and something we agree with, will grant you a fate point. And fate points, are you're choosing to ask the DM with this resource to change the narrative. So if it would be that an attack would miss, you can ask with a fate point to change that narrative to a hit. The DM doesn't have to agree. It's not a binding contract with the DM where you can lock it in, but we will try and help you with those cool fate points. Alongside that, you can get fate points through our stars and wishes system at the end of each game, and I'll go over that in another video. As another part of exploration, we have the puzzles and traps exploration section. And one of the coolest videos I've seen is this trap triggering homebrew rule that a person called Dale's Kingsmill from the Kingsmill Factory YouTube channel talks about, and they talk about if a creature like an ally or something like that in your party hits a trap, the DM will say, let's have a quick pause, and you're going to hear the word click. Either say it in chat or I'll say it out loud, and you hear click. Or you get told that a trap's going off and you hear the word click. Then you have that time after that to decide what you want to do. So the DM may say like, I'm going to get you a roll for a Moxie initiative, or you have to just each individually, when you're asked by the DM, like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You'll be asked to kind of throw in a, my character hops to the ground and gets low or something like that. During that time, you can't really roll too much checks or anything like that, because it is the click and it's already happened. Additionally, on top of that, area effects for things like explosions and especially for player targeted spells and abilities. If you request to have it fit to hit multiple targets, often will get allowed because your character will aim it the way that you would want it to be aimed, the way that you're imagining it. But just within reason, if your intended target is just a bit outside the circle, it won't get hit. You have to choose one or the other. Moving on, we have the combat reworks. So this is the third area of the 3 pillars that we focus on in this change. With that, we've got an armor class change where characters who are using the lower stat block will be using a armor change here. So it lists that there's 3 values that you would use for defenses, which is your armor class, which is the normal one that you get from your armor, evasion, and armor reduction. So these all come from what you're wearing as armor. Heavy armor has like a really good armor reduction, so you reduce damage while wearing any heavy armor, as a knight normally would expect, but they have a lot of trouble not being hit by the weapon. They wouldn't be able to just slide out of the way super quick like a person who's not wearing any armor would. Based off the equipment you wore and stuff like that. Light armors will prefer to not get hit at all. And there's an article here which explains that in more detail. The weapon changes alongside this armor change kind of do stuff like some of the weapons are a bit better at piercing or getting through the armor, and therefore the reduction that you would have from your heavy armor might be a bit nullified by certain weapons. And that's outlined in the damage reduction. So there's a new weapon type of damage called puncturing. Let me just double check. It's puncturing, quaking as the bludgeoning type, and rending as the slashing type. And those would get through armor a little bit better, just because of the way that the weapon's designed or some sort of extra feature. In combat, we've changed it so that flanking is a +2 if you have an ally directly behind the creature that you're trying to hit. If you're not directly behind them and you're not in that kind of like parallel spot, the spot next to it is a +1 as long as you're within melee range. But it has to be within 5 feet. There's no flanking from further than that, because an enemy wouldn't be able to kind of like they would easily be able to turn around and kind of be not flanked as it were. Legacy characters have an additional defensive line, which is the guard points, and one of them is the light unarmored and unarmored light guard point. If you spend 15 movement during your turn, so you would sacrifice that movement. Let's say you're a character like a dwarf, 25 feet of movement. You expend 15 of it. You have 10 feet to move, so you move 10 feet in that turn, and then you sacrifice the rest to make sure you're kind of putting your shield up and making sure that you can see a clear line of sight of that, like an archer that's aiming at you. The archer then gets its turn and tries to attack you. You can use your guard point to move out of the way, and it doesn't cost a reaction. And what you can do is you can even move out of the line of sight. So say you're corner hugging, you can jump out of the way by getting out of that corner, and then they can't see you. So their attack will still go through, but it'll miss 100%. They can't hit you if they're around the corner. And then if a creature then runs past you in the hallway and not seeing you, you then get an attack of opportunity, and you can use your reaction on that attack of opportunity. It's not wasted by the guard point system. So characters with a lot of movement can make guard points multiple times in a turn. Along with that, with prepared actions, and these are reactions that you can set up. Prepared actions and prepared spell actions usually aren't that great, so we've buffed them a little bit. So say for example, if you use that last example where you're hiding in a corner in a hallway and someone shoots and you're around the corner now, and you had prepared an action that if a creature walks around the corner, I would be able to I'm going to hit them with my flame gauntlet, and that's more than just an attack. It's like an action to use the flame gauntlet, and then it would come around the corner and you'd flame it. As well as that, there's prepared spells. So say for example, if you're preparing a scorching ray for a creature that walks out from a mummy's tomb, you would expect that a mummy not coming out would not waste your spell slot, and that's what we're going to do. Unless there's some sort of feature that interrupts your spell casting, and you would then lose the spell if you weren't able to use it in the prepared way. If someone has like some sort of anti-mage, like held spells are now like wasted. On top of that, at 4th and 7th level, there's a special unlock for skill abilities. Some of them are passive, and the others are active. So some of the passive abilities, they're, for example, like you can learn fighting styles from the military branch of the Jungelis. That's one of the guilds that we have, and everyone can learn it. You just have to spend a bunch of downtime doing it. And then that passive is now going to take up your passive slot, and you only get one of them. You get a second greater slot, so that you have one lower and one greater slot, like lesser and a greater slot. So that's 2 slots. And let's say you have your second one as like an ability called Adrenaline. Yeah, so those would be your 2 passives. If you are the lowered stat line legacy character, you can also start getting a active slot and an active greater slot. So therefore you'd have 4 extra abilities rather than 2. Yeah, these affect your actions in game. They might be roleplay as well. It's definitely very cool. Moving on, next one is items, and along with this armor rework, we've made it so that armors can, for legacy characters, deteriorate or be enhanced to a pristine state, and then a pristine item kind of gets advantage on its attacks and stuff like that. The armors and shields are a little bit reworded for their property when they're in like a repair state. By default, a broken sword is essentially useless, but a well-worn or worn sword is what you would expect to buy from a shop. And if you're going to a very expensive shop, you can get pristine stuff. But then the repair state for legacy characters, you can actually go in and take the proficiencies and repair your own equipment during a short or long rest. As well as that, we have a system that everyone can use, which is called the weapon enchantments, and you can buy scrolls just from the shop. And a single weapon, say your longsword, can hold up to 3 enchantments, but then that weapon then becomes attunement. So you would have to attune to your longsword, but your longsword may have does extra damage to armor, sets creatures on fire, and does stuff like can block an extra hit. On top of that, there is the quick rest, and that is a just part of the short rest, long rest system. It mentions here that you can only use half your hit die for healing. The short rest itself is actually also outlines that you can't be doing stuff like repairing during the hour it takes to do a long rest, because the repair takes 2 hours. So while everyone else is resting, you can do stuff like that, but it's up to you. Creatures in the item section. The proficiencies. So there's a new tier of weapons called the advanced weapons. So there's simple, martial, and advanced. Advanced are a lot more kind of expensive or hard to find equipment. If you start out as a blood hunter, ranger, or fighter, or you multi-class into these classes, you would then get that proficiency. But otherwise, if you want to use the compound bow, I think is in the advanced weapon tier, you would have to either be a ranger, a fighter, or a blood hunter. Otherwise, there is a way to take talents for it, as there is a talent that trains for weapons, and that weapon training talent, if you already have martial and simple weapons, say you're a paladin or something, you would then take 1 point in that talent, and then you can jump up to advanced and start using new equipment, like the scepter. That uses dexterity. As well as that, there's a new tier of armor, which is the middle ground of an unarmored and a light character, and it's called the cloth armors, or robe or cloak armors. We've moved some stuff around, like padded armors in this section and stuff like that, but you can see the information for that in the article above on that armor change article. And unarmed defenses has been changed and buffed for a lot of characters. Yeah, with especially with legacy characters, we don't like the fact that a legacy defense character can get all this armor reduction and all these extra features, while an unarmored character using unarmored defense is just kind of left in the dust. So in line with the other changes, like light armor's gotten a bit better, same as unarmored. The next one is the item section, which I was touched on before, which is some games that I've run, people have asked like why like a donkey is in the item section. It's probably just like a holdover from the 3rd edition's source book, but anything that is a creature that appears in the equipment section of the player's handbook cannot be used for the purpose of features. Like you cannot use a artificer's invention features on a cow, or you can't summon a donkey or whatever it is using creation bard or whatever it is. It's not that way. Additionally, with firearms, we have in the weapons section we have black fire weapons, we have some bolters, and we have stuff like the like larger weapons and stuff like that. That is available for most characters, and it outlines if you're a simple ranged weapon user, like say you get simple weapons but you don't get advanced weapons, you get the simple firearms, the black fire pistol, And say you have simple and martial, you also get the black fire pistol and the rifle proficiency covered. But let's say you're in a weird specific spot where you get longbow as an elf of sort. You then can also instead learn the proficiency for a rifle instead of a longbow. And that seems to be it. So we're at the bottom, and there is an optional class feature section, which at level 8 of a class, if you stay pure in that class, like level 8 cleric, you can try to change your character into a rebirthed version, and that's listed here in this rebirth guidelines thread. So you go in threads, you go rebirth, and it even outlines 1 to 12, all the 12 different base 5e classes, what your rebirth changes you to, and what you get. Like, say for example, you become a grifter if you're a level in rogue. That should be rogue. Grifter gains these features, so you gain a cunning action called Dirty Tricks, and Dirty Tricks you can use it for backstabbing and stuff like that. And you get a sneak attack dice. All that kind of stuff comes from the fact that you've rebirthed. And when you rebirth as well, it mentions here that you choose a new class. So you can choose to go back into Rogue and get another set of Rogue levels, or you can now be a Ranger or a Wizard if you wish. And it's like a multi-class that you started as a different one. You would keep your talent points. So say you took weapon talent points for your first level 2 character, and then you reset again. You don't get another set of talent points, but at 4th level, your ability score improvement, one ability score improvement, let's say you increased your dex, and then you got 3 talents from that. So you would have 5 talents in total. You get to keep those talent points and those ability score improvements and start again. But going forward, you only get 1 ability score improvement per time you get that feature. So say, for example, you reach level 4 again. Instead of getting 2, you now get 1 as this rebirth character. It's definitely one of the coolest kind of things that no one really did, but a lot of people were trying to aim for it in higher levels and get like a, they at level 12 or level 14 they would have received ability score improvements a lot of times, and then they restart their character at level 1. So all that power goes back to the level 1 character. Definitely is a cool idea. If you have any further questions or you want more advice on how the game runs, let us know. This will be made available to everyone, and all the links here should keep updated. Anytime we change this, just let us know if you have any questions about it. Thanks again for watching our video, and I look forward to seeing you all out there in the wilds of Beyond the Boundary.